The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism. Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet.
Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Grand-Pichet. Always thrilled to be here with you.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
And for those of you who don't know, Dr. Grand-Pichet is a true expert in the field of autism. She's been working in this field for a ridiculous number of years, for one who has such good skin, right? It doesn't equate, right? But she's worked with a wide variety of individuals, everything from very young babies to senior citizens. She has a wealth of knowledge. She's truly a visionary in this field, that she recognizes not only that people on the spectrum are whole people, they have whole lives, and that has to be addressed, which thank you for looking at our kids and our adults and everyone in between that way. But she also recognizes that they have a group of people around them that are a support staff, and that those people have individual needs as well, be that the family, siblings,
right.
and also the people who are helping to take care of and to treat, that those are people who have to be also included in an equation of what do we need to do to make the most progress.
Absolutely.
So, and you help to take care of all of us,
Thank you
which
so
I
much.
appreciate.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you, honestly. So she is going to answer questions that you guys have sent in. We always like to give you a disclaimer at the start of the show that there is no expert in any field, no matter how many years they work, that could give individual specific advice in this particular format.
Right.
There is telehealth, which is different than this, right? But in this format, she's going to give you information of a general nature,
Right.
which is still incredible.
We hope it'll help.
People write in all the time and say how helpful this is.
That's great. That's great.
And this weekend I got to meet a lot of people in person who were saying that they were
Love
big
your
fans
show.
of the
Oh,
show,
that's great.
and that how helpful this is, and
That's
how much they
awesome.
learn from it. So truly wonderful. But you have to write in. So take advantage of the many different ways to write in. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. And I'm going to start with a question that came in last week that we didn't get to. What does the research say about young children getting only 20 hours a week of ABA therapy? Is it at all effective? I can't quote this, but I once heard about a study that did 20 hours a week for a group of children with autism and compared with children in regular ed who did not receive service, and they made equal progress, and this came into us last week. So, what would you like to say to that?
So, one of the things about autism that's really important for us to pay attention to is that no two children are the same, right? The children are very different from each other. And so I never really like to generalize and say, oh, 20 hours isn't enough. For one child, it might be enough. For another child, it might not be enough. Historically, the concept is that if you are doing a comprehensive ABA program, so if you're trying, and let me define that, the goal of ABA, I'm going to just keep going back in time. The ABA became an important thing, and back when we were able to, in the 80s, show that by doing intensive ABA, children on the spectrum were actually able to recover from autism. So this is when the world started paying attention to this science and everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's actually shows that these children don't have a lifelong genetic disorder necessarily, and that if you do all the right things, it is possible for at least some children to lead normal lives. And so that was the beginning of a whole new era of looking at the application of behavior analysis or behavioral psychology to autism. And so the original study, which was the LOVA study in '87, which was the seminal study in our field, changed everything, showed that there were three groups of children, and there was one group that was our experimental group, and this group was receiving 40 hours a week. Actually, they were receiving more than 40 hours a week, and that's kind of something that people don't realize. The reason that we had said 40 hours was because parents work 40 hours a week, so those were the hours where a therapist was working with the child. But really, in that study, we had trained the parents to the point that they were part of the team. And so when the therapists were gone home, the child would continue to receive therapy from the parents. And we did that for many years after the '87 study as well, where parents were actually part of the therapy team, which makes me think maybe we should start actually pushing that a little bit more.
I'm just having a moment here where I'm like, I don't emphasize that enough.
Yeah. And it's funny, if you go back and read that original study where the biggest success was, you can see that it should say every waking hour. And I remember this because we used to talk about that. We used to say, when we were determining recommendations, we'd always look at, if it's a 2-year-old, they're not as awake as long as a 4-year-old is, right? They take naps and so on. So we'd look at covering every waking hour using the entire team and the family, the parents.
And I think a lot of people know that you were a part of that study.
Absolutely,
that study that came out in '87.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, the film of the study I helped make. Yeah. So I worked very hard on that study, and many of the children, I knew most of those children, and was part of their treatment teams or supervising their treatment teams. So I knew those kids. So what was very important was that we did this study, that was our experimental group. The other two groups were receiving either 10 hours a week of our type of therapy, and that was only because they were too far from UCLA. And at that time we had students doing this therapy, and we couldn't send them to 50 miles out. So those kids were receiving 10 hours a week just because we were not in a position to give them 40. And then there was the third group. The third group was receiving about 10 hours a week of intervention at a different section of UCLA, which was called the Neuropsychiatric Institute, NPI, which is now Semel Institute.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that was NPI. And so essentially what ended up happening after about 2.5 years, and there were other things, like we tried to match the kids. The kids were all below a certain age, below age 3.5, 4. So what ended up happening after a couple of years was that our group, half of the kids had recovered, and I'm going to talk about the definition of that, the experimental group. The other two groups who were receiving 10 hours each, one of them, remember, was receiving 10 hours of our own intervention. It just wasn't enough, and only 2% of those children had actually recovered, which was really one child, and 47% of the experimental group had. So this really showed that there's a huge difference when you do intensive work. Yeah. If you don't do enough intensive work, it's just not going to hit all the kids. It's not going to work.
But that's everything in life.
That's everything in life.
If you're trying to learn to play the violin, and you only spend an hour on it a week, you're going to get a much different result than if you spend 40 hours a week on it.
That's exactly right. Now, that's a great example, because when you look at something like playing the violin, even if you do an hour a week, eventually in 40 years you might learn just as much as someone who did 10 hours a week learned when they were 5. You know what I mean? So what you're doing by doing less hours is you're extending the time frame. Now, with children who are learning, you don't have the luxury of extending the time frame, because when you do that, the child is aging, right? The chronological age is increasing. And as they get older and older and older, two things happen. One is there are thousands more things they have to learn. Just think about what a 2-year-old is capable of doing as opposed to a 6-year-old or 5-year-old.
Yeah.
I mean, a 5-year-old being able to teach all the things that a typically developing 5-year-old knows how to do is a massive amount of work. And then on top of that, the child now has to go to school as well.
Yeah.
So your hours are going down. Your hours of availability for this child are going down, and the amount of stuff that the child has to learn is increasing. So that's one thing. Yeah. The other thing that happens is brain plasticity goes down. So the highest, we just can't learn enough when we're past age 7. But this is why people who are fluent in multiple languages have always been exposed to those languages prior to age 7, because the highest flexibility of the brain and the ability to learn new material is much, much younger.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, the concept of teaching a child intensively is very, very important. Now, if you have a child, so that's to the study, right? That's the key study. I think the study that you are referring to here is the Sallows study, the Glenn Sallows study. And you should actually go back and look at that study. It's not a matter of there was equal progress. There were a lot of different findings in that study. And here's what I want you to think about. Don't worry about a study. You have a child. And what's important is to think about your child, because studies in general, the findings of a study are relevant only in that they apply to masses. When you're looking at one single child and you're looking at a spectrum disorder like autism, it's really valuable, more valid, much more valid, if you have the ability to just look at your child and see what would be appropriate for your child. If there's a very, very high functioning young child, then obviously what they have to learn is less, and you have more time because they're very young, like 2 years old. If it's a very severely autistic older child, then obviously what they need to learn is more, and you're out of time, right? So this is what's important. How much time do you have, and how severely in need is your child? So that's why I always say, do an assessment to find out exactly what your child needs. That's why many years ago, as you know, Shannon, we developed the skills index, the assessment on skills. And I really recommend for this viewer to get on skills. And that is just, you go online and you look for skillsforautism.com.
I have a little tent somewhere, and I'm
I
looking
know,
for
I
it
don't
to
see
see.
it anywhere.
I moved it off the desk. I'll find it.
But essentially, just Google skillsforautism.com and you'll go in there. And there's an assessment portion, and it starts with asking you questions about your child. You put in your child's age, your chronological age, and so the assessment will give you every possible skill that a typically functioning child of that age should be able to master, should be able to do right now. So it'll ask you questions. It'll ask you hundreds of questions. For example, it'll start with, does your child make sounds? If you say yes to that, you go to more advanced questions like what kind of sound. It's all yes and no. Does your child make this type of sound? Does your child say single words? Does your child communicate in 3-word phrases? Does your child use these types of adjectives, or whatever it is? It keeps going on, and that's just language, but the questions are through all areas of functioning. So you'll get a series of questions in language, motor, adaptive skills, social skills, play skills. Let's see, motor is both fine motor and gross motor. Executive functions, cognitive skills. I mean, it's pretty much across all areas of functioning, including academic. So you answer all these questions, yes or no, my child can or cannot, and you'll get a nice little visual that shows the deficits, like the areas your child is not doing, and they should, because it's their age level. Like, you should be actually able to say 3-word phrases if you are age 2, that sort of thing. And it'll give you an exact listing of all the different sub-skills that need to be taught to catch your child up to a certain age. If if it, you know, you look at that, and now someone who is experienced with ABA will come in and they'll start doing work with your child for a few months. This is the most accurate you can get. And if it's a good BCBA who's done this for many years, that's very important because this is really based on experience, right? You look at the rate of acquisition of the child. Now, we've actually developed an algorithm which we're trying to get on external skills so people can play with this. And once your child is learning for 6 months or so, we develop what's called a rate of learning line. Like, it'll show how fast your child masters things. Does your child master them, like a new thing every hour? Does your child master a new concept every week? Whatever it is, of a certain difficulty level, right? So it shows kind of like if your child is mastering things at this angle versus at this angle, that means they're mastering things pretty rapidly. You put in your child's age, you put in you have a history of your child's learning rate. That's learning rate. That's the number of items they learn over time. And then you know how long and how many hours. And you say, okay, my child's only 2, and I have like 3 more years where my child will be 5. And how much intensity do I need for 3 years in order for my child to actually get to typical levels? So he's missing, let's say, 200 skills. I need to teach these 200 skills, and he's learning at this rate. How many hours a week should I actually do in order for my child to hit the line of trajectory that gets to the point where he's going to master all these 200 things, right? It'll tell you the intensity. Now, the intensity is going to be either very intense, like 40 hours, or more, or it's going to be 20 hours, or it's going to be 10 hours. It depends on your child and your child's rate of learning. That's like way more accurate than looking at what past research has said. Now, all of that aside, I do want to say kind of a disclaimer about this, because I'm one of those people that would like to, you know, when your child has aged, they've aged. The time has passed, right? So it's always better to err on the side of being cautious and doing more rather than doing less. Because by doing more, all you're doing is speeding up time, right? Your child might master things faster than age 5. They might get to the level of normal by 4. Great. Everybody's happy. By doing less, you might miss the mark. Right? Your child might get to age 5 and 6 and your funding all cut out and you have to go to school and your child still has 100 things left to learn. That's why I always push people to go for more intensity at the beginning when the child is young, because later on a lot of issues happen. It's much harder to get funding for older kids, and there's a million other things that you're dealing with, academics and safety and lots of other things.
But now, having said that,
a huge long answer,
right?
Sorry.
But having said that, for the mom of the 15-year-old who's watching, who's never had ABA,
right?
We don't want you to think that there's no reason to get ABA now, even though your child has aged out, and
aged out of
that
recovery,
intensive early,
aged out of recovery. That doesn't mean anything, right? Because for the 15-year-old, you have, let's say, you're at a point where there are like 100 skills missing, and the key skills that you want to teach your child, which would keep him safe, help him communicate, get him to a point where he can have a vocation, get him to a point where he might be able to live independently, all of those things do not necessitate teaching all 100 skills. You just maybe have to teach 20, 30 skills, and that's extremely doable. ABA is a way of teaching. It's not something that you age out of. It's effective even if you're 70 years old. It doesn't matter what age you are. It is a technique for teaching, and it works more than anything else. And it works not just with the population of individuals with autism. It works on us. It works with everyone. It's the most effective way of changing behavior. So absolutely, for the 15-year-old, for the 30-year-old, yesterday we had a call from someone who's, they were calling for a 45-year-old. And I was excited about it, because bringing someone in at that age to our adult center and helping them is very exciting.
It's life-changing.
Absolutely.
I mean, the families who it's just so incredible to think that sometimes there's one little thing that if you could fix it, the quality of life goes up for everyone, for that individual and for everybody
Definitely.
who loves them. So don't feel like there's no reason after a certain time. But if
Absolutely.
you are in that window of time when your child is young, take everything that you can and use it to the max. I say this to parents every day of the week, you will never be sorry if you do everything and more.
That's right.
You will get someplace that you didn't know that you could get. It will be different for every single person, but the thing that's great is you will have nothing left in you that's like, oh, I wonder if we had, right?
Right.
I see
Absolutely
the parents of the teenagers who go, oh man, I missed the boat. And they, I hate it when parents are stuck there because they're missing something right now. If you've got a young kid, don't give that to yourself later on. Give yourself the gift of knowing we did everything that we could and do as many hours
Absolutely
as you can.
right. For sure.
Okay. Good morning. My 8.5-year-old son with autism is very bright, considered high functioning. He still has behaviors and tantrums, is fully potty trained, and can ask for all he needs. Can ask questions like who, why, where, can have short conversations, but the things he likes.
About the things he likes.
Like speakers, movie credits, hip hop music. My question is, can my son still have a chance to recover with intense ABA? I contacted CARD in Edison, New Jersey, and I'm waiting for a response to hopefully start services soon. He's a very smart boy, but like I said earlier, sometimes has tantrums and injurious behavior when frustrated or mad. He'll be 9 in June. And she says, I get sad thinking, even though he's got so much potential and skills, that he would not be able to recover. He's also hyper, and attention can be a problem. Please let me know your opinion and thanks in advance. I would be so lost without this show. We're sending you a hug.
That's so nice of you, yeah. So what it's one of those things which I wish I knew more about your son, if I could do an evaluation or something, and then I could help you see the future a little bit more, but I don't, and this is not enough information for me to be able to say how far he'll go, right? But my recommendation to you is, it sounds like he's learned quite a lot, and that's great. It sounds like he's doing well. And I do recommend that you get him into an ABA program as soon as you possibly can, and that you do a lot of work, right? If you can, and this is one of the problems we hit when our kids are 8 or 9 or whatever, they're in school. And so our hours become extremely limited, and also funding sources generally won't fund comprehensive programs for kids over the age of 8. So, at best, your child will probably get something like 10, 15, maybe 20 hours of one-to-one therapy, which is going to be extremely helpful. What I recommend for you to do is a couple of things. One is, don't set recovery as your goal. Every single year, try to set a goal which has to do with the things you want your son to learn that year. So here's what you can do today, okay? You don't have to wait for us. You can do 2 things, which is what I did specifically for parents. Get on Skills, and the website for that is skillsforautism.com, skillsforautism.com. Get on Skills. And when you're on Skills, do everything. Get on there, become a client, answer the assessment questions about your son. It'll help you identify exactly what he needs to learn. From there, you will look and determine exactly what you want to accomplish every year, right? This year, I would like him to, have longer conversations. I want his conversations to be directed at children. I want him to be able to read facial expression. You'll be shocked at the amount of choice you have on Skills. We're not talking, we're talking about, you can choose things like, I want him to tell jokes. I want him to be able to lie. I want him to, it's everything and anything you want is on there. So, but you have to spend some time. And I suggest you set goals for yourself where you say, I'm going to do an hour on Skills every day. It'll take a week to answer the assessment, great. Then it'll take you, give yourself time, give yourself a month to acclimate. And Shannon has helped a lot of people acclimate to Skills. It's a big platform. It is big. It's like going into a supermarket for the first day and like, what are all these things? So give yourself time, because if you really learn skills, you will benefit from it beyond your imagination. Now, and you're not going to do all of it. You're just going to help select the things, right? And then you're going to go on IBT, which is ibehavioraltraining.com, the Institute for Behavior Training. And there you will teach yourself the techniques. You will learn how to teach things. You will learn how to get rid of challenging behaviors. You will learn how to, what you do whenever he has a tantrum. You'll learn what to do to get his attention. You'll learn what to do to not allow him to injure anyone or himself. You'll understand autism, and you'll understand what these behaviors are about, and you'll understand how to teach. So it's simple for him to understand. So do all of that, because this will keep you very engaged, and I promise you, every day you'll learn something new, every single day. Then you can work on teaching him, and hopefully by then a team of ABA experts have also joined you, and together you will now give him a lot of attention and support, and you'll make up for what even people who start at 3 years old, maybe they're not doing the right thing. And don't worry about time, don't worry about recovery, worry about what you can do now yourself, train yourself, and get a team of people to assist and support, and you work on it together. Don't assume that as soon as you get into a CARD program, you're going to have a whole bunch of people come and just take care of recovery. That's not how it works. It is all about your involvement. And I'm sorry, because I know as a parent, we're already overwhelmed, but you'll enjoy it. It's like kind of going to the gym. You don't want to do it at first, but once you get into it, you're like, I feel great. You will feel a lot better.
Absolutely. One of the things that I talk to parents about all the time is that CARD did a study a few years ago to see what predicts the best outcomes.
Right.
And I get really excited about talking that, because it wasn't minimized down to age, but the best outcomes come when there are 3 things that you do consistently. And one of them was give your child as many opportunities to learn as possible.
Right.
24/7.
Right.
As many
Absolutely.
opportunities as you can. The second one was having an experienced BCBA in your case, which if you get in with Edison, New Jersey, that's going to help you to be able to do that, because all CARD offices have experienced BCBAs. But the third one, and I said earlier when I shopped around and I was like, what is consistent with all these kids that are doing well, was parent involvement. If the parents learned it and followed through on it, it helped with the first one, which is having the many opportunities. And every parent that I saw who said, we're going to do as much as we can, and the thing that I said was, I want to be able to look him in the eye when he's 18 and be able to say we did everything we could. Wherever that gets us, I'm going to love him like there's nobody's business, and accept him wherever he is. But I want to be able to look at him and tell him we did it all. And if you do that, I can tell you, you will be thrilled with where you end up. I haven't met a single parent who at the end didn't say, you know what, we are fabulous, we're good. So that's, I think, hand in hand with what Dr. Grant-Boucher said. If you do those 3 things every day, you're going to be okay, and your kiddo's going to be okay, and there's going to be tremendous growth. Because every once in a while I get to ask a question. There's an article that we're going to cover in the news in a little while. Every once in a while this sort of pops up, and it has popped its ugly head again, because we're just about to head into April. And the title of the article is, Can Some Children Outgrow Autism? Now this, and then when you read the article, about 3 paragraphs down, it refers to the fact that there are studies that show that children who get intensive therapy can get to the point where they no longer qualify for the diagnosis. Right. But what gets me furious is that the title is, Can They Outgrow Autism? Because I think even though technically, a child gets to the point where they grow skills and no longer have the, the diagnosis apply, so you could squint at it and go outgrow. The connotation of outgrow is that it just happened,
right,
organically,
right,
that the the autism fairy came in and bonked you on the head and you no longer have autism,
right,
which to me is an insult of all the work
it's
that
offensive,
you do,
right,
and that
right,
we as parents do, and that our kids do. And also in the article it says, is it possible that some kids are misdiagnosed? That also ticks me off. That because my child does well, some people tell me, yeah, I don't think he really had autism.
Yeah.
And that completely negates all the hard work that was done by people.
Right.
And I'm just wondering what your words matter.
Yeah.
So the outgrow thing really tears my ticket. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think it becomes a little bit clear that the author may have had an intention by putting all of that in one article, right? Because when you put the words like outgrow and misdiagnosis in the same article, it gives the implied intention that, oh, you know, there's autism, there's just a lot of kids who are misdiagnosed, and even if they're behaving slightly differently, they'll outgrow it. Okay, so that is all not true. So the way I look at it in regards to outgrow, first of all, misdiagnosis, yeah, there's misdiagnosis in everything. That means nothing.
Yeah.
You know, so we're not talking about the percentage of kids who are misdiagnosed. There's probably less than 1% of kids that are misdiagnosed now. Same in 1994. Like, I mean, you know, so misdiagnosis means nothing. There's if the misdiagnosis is held stable between now and, let's say, 1994, when we had another DSM, then the only thing that we can conclude is that from that time it's gone from about 1 in I don't know how many, several hundred children to 1 in 50 now, right? So it's been increasing. So let's put the misdiagnosis thing on the side. The whole concept of outgrowing does imply that nothing else happens during the course of time, but the passage of time. And so with the passage of time, if it was, I could only answer that question really if we had the capability of putting someone in a closet for 15 years and nothing else happened in their environment, okay? Because autistic children, like anyone else, learn from their environment. The real question is, do they learn enough to catch up? It's really that simple. So a child with autism or any other kind of disability is going to have certain strengths. They're going to have a couple of things where they're not at their age level. They're just below their age level. Now, some kids are significantly below various areas. Other kids are not significantly below. They're slightly below. So, for example, an individual with Asperger's type is not going to have as many deficits as a child who has very clear autism, right? Even within the ASD spectrum, a child who is 1-1, so in other words, basically has very minimal support needs, is definitely going to have fewer deficits than a child who has significant support needs. A nonverbal child is going to need to learn more than a verbal child. A child who has attention difficulty is going to have to learn more than a child who doesn't have it. So there's all these levels, right? Now, so the time factor has to do with what they are exposed to and what they learn in that time. So now if someone is just living a normal life and they go to school, and if they, let's say, have Asperger's type and they have an incredible teacher at school, and one of those brilliant people who is focused on this child, and no matter what helps this child, they could recover from that. There's a possibility of that. But if it's a child who's nonverbal, has tantrums, is aggressive, has no social behavior, no eye contact, I don't care if the teacher is Albert Einstein, that teacher also has 20 other kids to deal with. That child on their own, with just the passage of time and a good school program, most likely it's not going to be enough.
Right.
So it's about what's enough, what you do with the passage of time. And ABA is about what you do with the passage of time. ABA is a massive amount of work. It is all the work that you put in during that passage of time that makes it possible for your child to outgrow or recover. But you don't just outgrow with doing nothing about it unless you are lucky enough to have a very minimal amount of ASD affecting you and you are coincidentally exposed to a brilliant teacher or some amazing program that that you encounter without doing anything about it.
And,
Does that
and I
answer
have,
your
it
question?
does
It's
answer
like-
my question, and thank you. I wanted them to hear it from your professional mouth, because I'm about, later in the next hour, I'm gonna spout off. But I also wanna say that when my son was diagnosed, like a lot of people, I went on the hunt. I was like, I need to find answers.
Of course.
And I was looking underneath every single rock to say, what's happening. And I was talking to a parent last night, and I said, I made it my business to find out every single kid that was a teenager or older that was doing well, and to find them and find their parents. And if they were speaking somewhere, my tuchus was there, and any way that I could get it there, and to say, what did you do?
Right.
And I have yet, and now I've been covering autism, from some sort of a journalistic show perspective for 10 years now. And I have, in all the people that I have interviewed, I have yet to find a person who has a life where they have no disability who can say, oh, it just happened organically.
Right.
It just, they've done a significant amount of therapy and sometimes biomedical, but I have yet to find a single person who was like, I don't know, I just outgrew it, I just figured it out on my own.
Right.
There is always a parent and a team behind it that worked like dogs and used ABA, or Temple Grandin still needs some accommodations.
Yeah.
But Temple is very high functioning, but if you look at what her mother did, and we've interviewed her mother, but her mother and her aunt were like really proficient ABA therapists before
Right.
they knew what ABA was.
Right.
Exactly some of the things that are being done with kids now, her mother and her aunt sat and did. So anyway.
And so in general, just to kind of address the other side of this, most of the time, if you don't do things, not only will the individual not outgrow, but they get worse.
Right.
They don't get worse. The expectations and the expectations of life become more, and therefore things get worse. So in other words, as you become an adult or an older child, there are more expectations of you. And what normally typically happens is you, the individual who has been diagnosed, become frustrated, and then challenging behaviors start to happen. And with the more time that goes by, those challenging behaviors actually become more imprinted. So it's sort of like, if I spend 1 year, if I'm a 2-year-old and I'm tantruming every time I want something instead of using my words, it's easy, it's not that hard for a behavior analyst to modify that behavior, because it's easier to teach a 2- to 3-year-old, listen, your tantrum's not going to work, you need to use your words and then it'll work and we'll reward you. But if you're like, let's say, been doing that for 15 years, it takes a lot of effort and you're a lot harder to deal with every time you tantrum. So, behavior change is easier to make when you're younger, when a behavior hasn't become so imprinted. And so, not doing things just usually ends up not being the best. It ends up being worse.
Good morning and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. I'm here live in the studio with Dr. Doreen Grant-Pichet.
morning.
Welcome. We're so thrilled that we have you 2 weeks in a row. It's amazing.
Lovely, it's lovely.
We love it when we have Dr. Grant-Pichet with us. We understand, though, that sometimes she can't be here, but we have her again this week, and that's really, really fun. For those of you who don't know her, Dr. Grant-Pichet is a true expert in the field of autism. She's been working in this field for 40, that's hard for me to say, 40 years plus. And working with individuals, everyone up from very small babies up through senior citizens, to help them to realize their full potential, to be able to lead and live the lives that they choose to live and lead,
Right.
because it's based on what's important to them. But you also, I find that there are some people who get that piece, but very few people who get that piece and then also understand what it's like for the parents,
Yeah.
because that's a specific I can't even talk this morning, a specific portion of it, the
Sure.
parents and what we
Sure.
want for our kids, and then also understanding how the world revolves around autism, understanding the insurance piece, the legislative piece, and the way the world interacts with autism. I think that no one gets all of those pieces like you do. I really feel
Thank
that
you
you are
very
the
much.
preeminent expert and the visionary leading us to a better place, and I thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think it's, for me, it's just, this has been my whole life. So, and I've
But thank you for
learned
that.
parts of it. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure. It's been a journey where you kind of experience each of those things that you mentioned at different times. So it's been easy to bring it all together because you're just learning more and more as time goes by. I learned I've always told you my initial draw into autism was the moms. For me, it was always I could not walk away from moms who would come to me at UCLA and just cry, And so for me, as a psychologist first, it was really all about understanding their perspective, understanding what they're going through, understanding how this feels. I was very young. I couldn't really grasp what it's like to have children, and then for your child. In those days, it was very much like your child's future was taken away type of thing, right? This is before the 1987 study. So it was very scary for them. And so then living through that with the moms helped me see their perspective. And then, of course, after that, it became like more about honing the therapy and how do we make the therapy better for the kids and what are the ways. And ABA has just come so far, It has improved so much in terms of just what we've learned and what works and doesn't work and applications of behavior analysis and all that. And then, of course, everything that goes on around us. Like, it's just been amazing. This morning I always in the morning check for autism news. And I was just looking, and it's like, there's just so much in the world of autism now, and it's crazy. Like years and years ago when you would Google autism, nothing came up, nothing.
Yeah.
And now it's like every aspect comes up, from insurance to genetics to all the activities to the sensory friendly things to, like, it's amazing. It's a whole world.
Well, during a break, we'll have to compare notes because every Wednesday, Nancy and I cover in the news. So we pick like the top three things in the news that we've noticed in the last week. There's never enough time to cover all the things, especially as it gets close to April. Of course, it used to be in April, they would just dump all these news stories. Now it really starts in February, that warming up towards April for people, adding stories that are sometimes inspirational, sometimes it's the research. So we'll have to compare notes to what you saw and what I saw, because your internet shows different things, but fascinating. And in fact, I want to start with I just want to comment that one of the questions that we had written in yesterday, and we actually got a couple of different calls about this, that people were asking us to weigh in this morning on a story that's been on Dr. Phil this week on it was on Monday and Tuesday, I guess.
Yeah.
I have not had a chance to see it yet.
I haven't seen it either.
But I want to say to people, we have received your messages about it. I know I'm going to check it out. I guess it's available on YouTube.
Right.
A family with 2 kids, one who has a diagnosis of early schizophrenia.
Okay.
The other one who has a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, but mom is saying that maybe it's schizophrenia, and there's grave concern that people have written in and said, we're very worried about these 2 young people with the parents that they have. My understanding in depth conversations, because people were calling saying, we want you guys to talk about this, but my understanding is that Dr. Phil, you've been on Dr. Phil.
Yeah, and I'm actually surprised because usually they will call me if there's something with autism going on their show.
There's so much more apparently going on with this family, and my understanding is that the mom is more interested in taking videos of her son and posting them on YouTube, and her interacting with him in a way that is not healthy or proper, and trying to get someone to diagnose him with more than autism.
I see.
So I think that they're focusing more on that aspect of it, but I think these kids need help. And so I just want to say that, I will definitely check it out, and I will share the YouTube videos with Dr. Grandpichet. Maybe we could meet back about it next week and see.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Because there has been a great deal of concern about the kids.
And I'll try to look it up too.
Yeah, there we go. So I just wanted to say that. And also, you guys wanted to know, somebody had written in this morning and said you want to know when Gregory and Michelle Chabala are going to be on. So the time that they are scheduled today is for around 11:40. Sometime between 11:30, 11:40, we'll be having them on the show, and we're really excited for you guys to be joining us. Okay. But I'm going to start with a question that is somebody who said that they're a repeat asker, and we love that. And I love this particular question because it's clear that, you know, you're paying attention, and I love that. So they say, repeat question asker here. I love this forum. Thank you for sharing. What kind of rate of exemplar mastery and activity mastery per skills do you expect to see for most kids on the higher functioning side? Is there a rate of progress where you would be alarmed and think it's necessary to retool programs and such? The paraphrasing lesson is our goal. However, mandatory is to have auditory memory. That makes sense. We're having trouble when presenting two sounds, wait 30 seconds, then ask what sounds were. But honestly, it's also hard for me too. Any advice? And child age 8, high functioning, and thank you for your time. Now, for a lot of our viewers, we're going to have to break that down a little bit because that even hurts my head.
Yeah,
but
I'll break it all down.
I love that they're asking this level of
Absolutely.
question.
So this is someone who is definitely engaged with our skills platform. And so thank you very much for you doing everything right. And I love this kind of question, and I'm happy to answer all your questions of this nature. This is great. So what this person is doing right now is their goal is to work on paraphrasing. And paraphrasing is essentially the ability to hear something and then say it in your own words, say it in a different way, right? And so in order to do the paraphrasing lesson, the person teaching here, and I don't know if it's a parent or an instructor, but what they're doing is one of the prerequisites, as you know in skills, every lesson will have multiple prerequisites. And the more advanced the lesson, like paraphrasing is one of the higher cognition lessons, in order to do that, you have to have other prerequisite lessons mastered. One of the prerequisites for paraphrasing is auditory memory. In other words, if you don't remember something, if we want to make sure your auditory memory is intact before we throw paraphrasing on you.
And so auditory memory is the ability to hear something and remember it.
Yeah. Exactly. So if you can't remember something, it's not fair to ask you to paraphrase it, because now it's not even about your ability to paraphrase, it's more about your ability to remember.
Yeah.
So it becomes very important to make sure you are remembering things. And that's where they're stuck, because what's happening is they're doing two sounds, waiting 30 seconds, and then the child is not having a hard time, is having a hard time repeating what the two sounds were. That's what the phase that they're stuck at. And then what the person is asking is, what is an acceptable rate of response for this? Like, what percentage of correct should there be so that they can move forward to the paraphrasing, or do they need to go back and do something else?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to have some ideas for you.
Can I just say that one of the things I love about ABA, and one of the first things I learned about ABA, is that ABA professionals always say the child is never wrong.
Yeah.
But if something isn't working at a certain point, you do retool it.
Yeah,
and that's a new concept for parents, because you know, we're told all the time by school and other things, well, the child just didn't get it.
It's
as
amazing.
if it's some mythical thing that the child was supposed to be able to overcome all the obstacles and get it just because you were teaching it the way you did. I love that ABA says, no, if it's not working this way, we'll try it this way. And if that isn't working, we'll do it that way.
Absolutely, and that is why we say ABA is individualized. Because everyone has different learning techniques and tools, right? So like for this child, you know, they would have a really, really hard time with paraphrasing. I could predict that they would have a very hard time with listening comprehension as well. So in school, if you have a listening comprehension issue, they're just going to say, your child has a big issue with listening comprehension, you know, then it's your responsibility, parent, to go home and deal with it.
Right.
But in ABA, we break it down and try to figure out why there's a problem. Is there a visual problem? Is there an auditory? Is it just the two together? What is going on? How do I break it down? Everything is about breaking it down to its most smallest chunks and teaching it that way.
Okay.
So for this particular situation, first let me answer and then I'll give you some ideas. But the rate of exemplar mastery is going to vary per child and per type of lesson. So it's very hard for me to give you a kind of rate. In general, on the basic lessons, when you're doing just standard lessons that involve visually and auditory input, we are looking for approximately 80 to 90% correct response over, let's say, 2 to 3 repetitions of a particular lesson. Okay, so 80 to 90%. And then usually it's important to also have at least 2 different people get that result, right? So that we're sure it's not prompted by one person inadvertently or something like that. So, but in this particular case, let's not be too concerned. I mean, let me tell you, even if as a parent, even if you're not getting 80% correct, let's say you're getting 75% correct, like you as the parent will have a feeling for what is going on here. Does my child get this, or they're just not getting it, right? So why don't you go back and do 2 things here. One is, go ahead and test out the paraphrasing lesson and see if your child is able to do that. Because what you're doing right now, you're getting stuck on the auditory memory, and perhaps it's just something about that particular lesson. We don't know. Go ahead and test it out. If you actually find that your child's doing fine with paraphrasing, move on. Just move forward.
Okay.
If you don't find that, and your child really does get stuck, and then we already know that the reason is that they're getting stuck on the auditory memory, let's shape that up. So instead of 30 seconds, give your child 2 sounds and wait 10 seconds. See if your child can master that. Then wait 12 seconds. See if your child can master that. Then wait 15, then 20. Shape it to 30, because children will learn this. Your memory will expand. This is, you guys, like when you do, let's say, crossword puzzles, your vocabulary gets better. When you do any kind of memory task, you are going to improve the child's memory. So why don't you do that and see if you can shape it up, okay? If you have a very hard time shaping up to 30 seconds, you can also, by the way, drop down to 1 sound and shape 1 sound up to 30 seconds and then go back to. So in other words, what I'm saying is make the task a lot easier, try to shape it up again. If absolutely all of that does not work, then I would be checking the child's auditory input. Okay. And I would really go to an audiologist and I would get some testing done, make sure that the child is hearing all sounds. Okay. Because you'd be surprised how important it is that a lot of our children don't hear all sounds. There's a particular test. I saw another one where it's like, what do I ask a developmental pediatrician? Oh. It's funny because there's a test that is done for auditory memory. It's called the Woodcock-Johnson test of auditory memory. Why I remember this, I don't know. Okay. But that test I remember myself just having one of those like aha moments with one of my kids, because this is a test and it has quadrants of pictures, and you will ask the child to point to or touch pictures, and the pictures are similar. So like they're similar. The pictures are not similar. The label of the picture is similar. So there will be a picture of a taxi cab, and then a picture of a can, okay, and a picture of a cat, okay, and that sort of thing. And the only differentiating thing is the last sound, right? Cab, yes, can, cat, and so on. And you will ask the child to touch cab, and you'll see if the child can identify it correctly. And if they can't, it tells you that they're having a hard time with the last sound of the word. Okay? And so I remember that I had this child, and it became like the example that I remember for some reason is that there's a picture of a moon, and one of the ones in the quadrant is a cow, and I don't remember what the other ones are, but this child would always, when I would ask to touch moon, touch the cow, because they thought it's moo. They'd never heard the ending N. And it was just, as you can see, it starts to cause a lot of issues, yes, right? It starts to cause problems in comprehension of, now imagine if you're having a hard time understanding when I say moon, then if I use that in a sentence pretty rapidly and the moon was under the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then it starts to mess with the comprehension of the whole sentence. And then if that happens frequently enough, it's not just that you're not understanding things, it's also that you give up.
Yes.
Right? Think about the child who's having a hard time and they're like, what did they say, moon or moo? Did they say cat or cat? After a while, the child just shuts off.
Yeah.
Because it becomes too confusing.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason that it becomes really important to check auditory input if you can. And that's why we do these crazy exercises. I mean, who cares if your child can remember? But this is the reason. It's because
Wow.
the base of it is very important. We want to make sure they're receiving auditory. We want to make sure they're able to remember auditory. And then all of that goes to paraphrasing.
Okay.
So that's
Fascinating.
long
Well, I
answer.
learned a lot.
Sorry.
No, but we love that because then we learn all these other things.
Yeah,
That's my favorite
interesting.
kind of question. All right, we're going to take a short break and then we're going to be back with more of your questions, so stick with us. Welcome back. We are here with Dr. Doreen Grant-Boucher, and I'm looking at the Facebook, and I know that there are comments there, but I can't see them, and I don't know why, and I'm going to figure that out. But we do have other comments that have come into us and other questions. So I want to start with this one because it's a particularly fabulous one. Hi, thank you for such an informative show. I'm a BCBA, and for those of you who that's a new term, that's a Board Certified Behavior Analyst. I'm a BCBA and working with a 13-year-old girl. She does not make any decisions on her own and will ask her peers to make a decision for her, even for simple things such as what color marker to use. If her therapist does not make a decision for her, she leaves the room to ask someone else. How do we teach her to make her own decisions?
That's awesome.
It is awesome.
Yeah, and I have a couple of quick suggestions. So one is don't let her leave the room until she makes a decision. And that's number one. Like literally she needs to make a decision before she's going to leave. Second thing is you could actually even make the decision at the door. In other words, you have to pick a card. And if you pick, you can't see what's written on the card, but if one card says stay and the other card says leave, and she has to pick it from the back, but she has to pick one. Okay. And if she picks one that says leave, she can leave. Or you can even show it to her, and if she really wants to leave the room, then she has to pick the card that says leave. And the other thing is have her make positive, negative choices. So don't start with two things that are neutral. If she's hungry, let her choose a food that she likes, and the alternative choice is one that she hates. If she needs to go to the bathroom, have her choose the, card that says, I need to go to the bathroom, as opposed to the one that says you have to stay. Like, give her choices where there's a definite, clear choice for her. Start there. If you know her preferences, like food preferences, anything preferences, time preferences, clothing preferences, jewelry, makeup, whatever is her, I don't know anything about, she's 13, so you're going to have a lot of preferences. And have her choose, give her the option of choosing something she really likes versus something she really dislikes. And then gradually introduce things that are also neutral. When we do choice, the first thing we do is always a dichotomy that's pretty clear. So it's like the child is definitely motivated to choose the right thing. Mm-hmm. And that'll help with just choices. And then you gradually have to just put her in a position where even if the two stimuli are neutral, she still has to make a choice before she can go to the next activity. And really, that's as simple as it gets.
Well, it makes me think of, there's a video in Skills, and Skills is a tool that you can use that does many different things, but it has lessons, and a lot of lessons have a video that you can click on that shows a therapist doing the lesson with a child.
Right.
And there is a video of Logan Shepherd that is doing choices, and the therapist is sitting there, and she has a bottle of Italian salad dressing
Yeah,
and a
that's-
lollipop.
Right, that is for the reading facial expression lesson.
Oh, I thought it was for choices.
Yeah, no, it's for reading facial expression. So basically, what she does is she has a lollipop and salad dressing.
Right.
And this is the period of time when Logan didn't really like he hated salad dressing.
Right.
And so it was, she would say, which one do I want? That was the stimulus.
Okay.
Well, that's the ST. What do I want? And he, of course, being at that point, I think 2 to 3,
Right.
says the lollipop, right?
Right.
And gives her the lollipop.
Right.
And she takes the lollipop and licks it and then goes like a facial expression, like, I
don't
hate
remember that
this.
part. Yeah.
And then puts it down and says, I'm hungry, which one do I want? And the lesson is that Logan learns right away from her facial expression
see.
that wasn't the one. Even if I like that one, it's the theory of mind lesson.
Right.
She doesn't. So I need to now try the other thing. Gives her the salad dressing, because in the beginning she does the lollipop and does the salad dressing and goes, So then now he's reading, and then finally gives her the salad dressing. She sips it and says, yeah, or something like that.
Okay, I totally had it remembered
But
wrong.
no, but
so
I
it's
mean-
totally not, that doesn't apply to this, but it
But-
gives us the opportunity to say that there are videos that demonstrate
Absolutely,
these things.
and you could use the same stimuli, and you could put in front of him the lollipop, because we knew at that time his preference was lollipop.
Right.
Put the lollipop in the salad dressing and say pick one, and that's just making the choice, right? In
Yes.
this case, the BCBA just wants to make sure this girl makes a choice.
Okay. I have a